All right, I think we're going to get started, everyone. So welcome to session 3 of 3 of Studio to Stage, brought to you by FEMME House. My name's Claire. I also go by Daltrick as an artist or the Small Prof as an educator. And thank you all so much for being here. I see some familiar names from previous weeks. So welcome back if you are returning, and we'll see if other folks join us too. As you know, of course, this is being recorded, right? And this is going to be uploaded to FEMME House's YouTube channel. So I can show you that later on too when we do a quick recap of things later on. But welcome one and all. Really happy to join you from New York on this slightly muggy kind of weather. I don't know if you can see outside. It looks not too bad, but it's kind of cloudy today. So hopefully everyone's doing good wherever you are tuning in from. But yes, this is brought to you by FEMME House. So just a quick little plug. Hopefully most people are familiar with FEMME House at this stage because y'all have been here. But just to share a little bit about FEMME House with you. FEMME House is an amazing organization that has a ton of free programming related to most things in terms of like music tech and DJing and electronic music and production. So we're here today for the third and last part of this series, Studio to Stage, where I've been showing folks how to bring their productions from a linear setting into today's focus really being kind of like a slightly non-linear type of approach, but really any kind of live performance version of something that you might want to do. So our past 2 sessions are up on YouTube. They were recorded, and those kind of dealt a little bit more with like the basics and then somewhat the low intermediate level things. Today we're going to advance into the slightly more intermediate and potentially more advanced considerations that you might want to take into account if you are translating some of your studio productions into a live setting. Right. And if you've registered on Posh, presumably that's how you got here with our Zoom link, right? Please check out other things that FEMME House are offering too. If you head over to the FEMME House website, you'll see a bunch of different upcoming sessions. We got some cool sessions with Babyweight and also with Mini Bear, who are amazing. So please go ahead and check those out. It'll take you to their respective Posh response sessions, and you can RSVP over there. So thanks again for joining us for today. We're going to talk a little bit about some more advanced things jumping off of our previous session. So I will do a quick recap of what we previously covered before diving right in. But in case you are joining us for the first time, or if you are, watching this, I guess, in the asynchronous land of the greater internet later on, just a quick intro if we haven't met yet. So my name's Claire. Like I said, she, her, hers. I have an artist project that's called Daltrick, and that's really the main avenue through which I share a lot of my original music, original live performances. I started as a live performer first, actually, as Daltrick, and then I transitioned into being a producer. So I kind of did the reverse of what we're doing today, I suppose. But still, I usually help a lot of folks do the studio to stage kind of pipeline, either as an educator. I go by the Small Prof. That's like my fun little educational moniker because I teach at a couple of educational institutions like Berklee College of Music and the City University of New York, as well as Harvard at the moment. But also, I do a lot of consulting as an Ableton certified trainer. So I help a lot of other artists who want to build their shows to do so, regardless of what kind of show they're going for. Maybe a more linear playback style, which is what we've done up until this point, or maybe something that's a little bit more experimental and improvisational, which we'll get into a bit of today. So I talked a little bit more about myself in previous sessions too, so I won't go too deep into this. But yeah, just a general background for what we're doing. Or for who you're learning with, rather. But for what we're doing, right, let's talk a little bit about the agenda per session, right? So we talked a little bit more about foundational things in session 1, including some mindset and goal setting recommendations that I had for the group. So if you are, joining us for the first time, it might be worth kind of going back to those previous replays and seeing some of the recommendations that I made. But we kind of got ourselves set up for like, hey, what exactly is live electronic performance? What does it mean to bring something from a studio production / composition into the stage live kind of environment? So we talked about that in session 1. Last week in session 2, we dealt a little bit more with project files, and I shared one of my own project files with the group, which you're welcome to continue using today, or if you have your own studio production, that you want to work with in Ableton Live, that's also great. After I do this quick intro and recap, I will share with you again the link for downloading that project file. You're certainly welcome to help yourself to it if you would like to. And then we also talked about various performance assets like MIDI clips and having a MIDI controller that you could use, right? So for the hardware part, we used the very faithful Akai MPK Mini, which I'm showing you over here in my camera, right? And I'll show you this again later on too. We will be using this today, although I will also be introducing an alternative type of controller that we call a grid controller. I briefly showed folks this last week, but we're going to take a look at what it means to use a Launchpad. For example, this is the Launchpad Mini. Last week I showed the Launchpad X, which is a slightly larger version of the Launchpad. But for our basic kind of things that we want to do today with performance, I thought the Mini might be helpful because it actually fits better into the frame. I think last week when I brought the Launchpad, it was like kind of big. So I decided the Launchpad Mini for today. So we got two mini controllers, mini MIDI controllers that will help us out for what we want to try to do. So more on that today, of course. That was our main thing last week. For today, we're going to look into more intermediate/advanced considerations. Like, hey, if we want to elevate our performances and make them even more interactive than they might currently be in this linear left to right form that we have, what else can we do? So we'll look at some more advanced electronic performance techniques specifically, but also other things like, hey, when I'm designing my performance rig, like what should I consider as a priority list of sorts, right? So that's my goal with y'all today as well. And then a couple of other practical performance tips too. We do have a Q&A in Zoom that's available to you throughout today's webinar, so you're certainly welcome to use that if you have questions for me. And of course, we can also have additional questions at the end of the session today. I usually leave about 5 to 10 minutes for that. So stay tuned if you have more questions. So deeper in today's agenda, we will be reviewing session 2, like I said, just briefly, not too much, just to kind of get us on the same page. So a recap of effects, live MIDI synths, and samples, which we looked into last week. Last week, when we worked on this project, we had some live MIDI software synthesizers from Ableton Live, as well as one of the stock drum racks in Live, which is really just a container for samples, right, that we can play live using our MIDI controllers. We tried to talk a little bit about live audio input, but because I was going so in depth with people, which I usually do, and I'm quite ambitious about things, we didn't do live audio input, so that's first on our menu for today. And you might already even be able to hear that my voice today actually sounds a little bit more compressed, and that's because I have some compression on it from Ableton Live, so I'll show you that in a moment. And to that end, we will talk more about live audio processing, regardless of whether you are processing a live vocal, which was a request from last week, or if you are processing a guitar or bass or synthesizer, any other kind of live audio element. We'll talk about that too. Right, and then we'll kind of switch gears a little bit from this idea of linear performance, meaning you have a project file, you mute the parts you want to play live so that you can play those live without getting like a double signal or anything. That's what we talked about last week. But today we'll say, hey, what if we want to step a little bit away from this fixed linear structure? What if I want to bring a little bit more of a sense of improvisation, of form, into my pieces, right? Maybe I want to loop things, for example, or vamp, as we say on a certain section. Like, you want to extend the intro, make it like 8 bars instead of 4, perhaps, in your studio production. So that's where nonlinear performance as a concept really comes in, and Ableton Live as a software really excels at that. You can certainly try to do some elements of nonlinear performing in other DAWs like Logic and perhaps even Pro Tools. But in my experience, Live has been the best for that. And, we forget sometimes that it's called Ableton Live, right? A lot of people will say Ableton, but that's actually the company's name. The software is Live. And it was originally designed or optimized for live performance. So we'll talk a little bit about how we can do that. And of course, like with the other webinars, I will give folks, attendees, a couple of moments and pauses here and there to try that out before we move on and also ask questions and things like that. And of course, to wrap things up, we will speak about other practical topics like, hey, out there in the world, once you've established what you're performing, what are you going to do to shop yourself around? And that's going to be a little bit more of a somewhat casual kind of conversation that I will lead, and I'll give you some examples from my own performances that I've done out in the world too. So that's an overview of our session for today. Before we proceed, I did want to jump ahead into one of my slides so that I can show you a link that you can head over to. So I'm going to copy and paste this link into the chat in Zoom. I think you might not be able to reply, but that's okay. It's just something that you can click on and access. And if you're not able to access the chat for whatever reason, you can just submit a little Q&A question and I'll reply to you in the Zoom Q&A with a link. But it's daltrick.gumroad.com/L, just the letter L, / FH Studio to Stage for FEMME House Studio to Stage. And if you head over there, you should be able to see a free project for you to download. I will pop over there as well. So let me join you there so I can show you what it looks like. Cool. And it might not look exactly the same. Oh, whoops, stop sharing. It might not look exactly the same, which is fine, but let me see. There it is. Okay, Studio to Stage. Cool. So Daltrick ID for FEMME House Studio to Stage is the name of the project we're downloading. Feel free to just put in 0 and then you can say, I want this. And I think Gumroad will just ask you for your email address and you should be able to download it. For folks who have attended my previous sessions, including ones outside of this Studio to Stage, specific series, this is a piece from my top lining session that I led for FEMME House a couple of 2 months ago now. It was in February, I think. So we're using this as kind of like a demo project of sorts. It is rather big, so that's why I wanted to give y'all the link at the start of the webinar so that if we need to wait for a little bit of time for it to download on your end, you do have that time to download it, right? So that's going to be what we use for today. I will also say, though, that if you're ever interested in downloading some other performance-related tools, perhaps I can do a quick plug of myself, but if you go to daltrick.gumroad.com without this other extension at the back, you should be directed to my Gumroad page. So this is my Gumroad page. For folks who might not be familiar with Gumroad, really all that it is a platform where a lot of electronic musicians and music technologists like to share downloadable materials either for free or for a small fee. So I have that too. There are some paid things over here that could be useful for performing, like some effect sets and like vocal looping stuff. We'll talk a little bit about this today, actually, so you might not need it even. But there's also some free stuff that I love sharing, and mostly with my students, actually, in this case, just to demonstrate how to build your own effect racks in live. So as you can see, most of these are optimized for live, actually. I've got an echo rack for delays. I've got a beat repeat rack for capturing slices of audio and then repeating them. I've also got a general audio effects rack that's named after my colleague, Dan Freeman, who's an amazing live performer, and if you haven't checked him out, please do. If we have time today, I'd love to also show you some videos from Dan. But this mirrors a previous rack that he built, and then I subbed for one of his classes at Berkeley when he was still teaching at Berkeley, and that's why it's called the Dan subbing rack, because with his class of students, we kind of rebuilt some effects, and I'd be happy to share that with you for free, so that's why that's available there too. So yes, please download the project file. If you are not going to use one of your own project files, you're certainly welcome to do that too, of course. And in fact, I think that would be my personal recommendation since you are applying it to your own music. But if you don't have a project file that you're working with, or if you just prefer to follow along, then this is available for you. Okay. So before we dive a little bit back in, just a quick recap. Like I said, we talked a lot about different types of software configuration and controllers last week. So I did want to just briefly retouch on this again in case anyone is getting their own system set up at this very moment. So let me head over here. All right. So yeah, just a quick reminder that, for today's session, we do want, if you're following along, right, we do want to check that we have our correct audio settings and also MIDI settings in place. So briefly, before we dive into all of this, let's make sure that Ableton Live is set up correctly. And I'm going to share my screen with you too. Let me just move a couple of windows around so that you are able to see whatever you need to see. And let's see, show Ableton Live. Great. Okay. So here I am in Ableton Live. You can actually see my vocals coming through. Haha, that's me. Yay. Okay. But more importantly, we want to check out the specific settings in Live. So if you are on a Mac, and Mac and PC are a little bit different, but if you're on a Mac, the keyboard shortcut for accessing your Live settings is Command, comma. And if you're on a PC, it is Control, comma, right? So Control and comma, Control and Command. are going to be kind of equivalent in both. So let me share my settings with you now. Right. So just as a reminder, anything for live performance, we do kind of want to aim for a sweet spot with what we call our buffer size, right? We want to aim to be at a position where we're not having so large of a buffer size that we feel a very obvious delay between when you're pressing a note and when you're hearing it back, right? But we also don't want to have such a small buffer size, in this case the minimum is 32, where our computers start to freak out a little bit, right? And yes, they're processing information quickly, but they're getting too stressed doing it. So for most people, in my experience, I found that most people tend to find that sweet spot around 256 to 128, but also rather than just looking at your buffer size, I think it's also important to consider the overall latency. The average human, I've noticed, tends to be sensitive between 10 to 15 milliseconds. Anything more than that, you start to feel that latency pushback. Although I also will say that for folks who are, keyboardists and guitarists, a keyboardist especially, or pianists, right? The average piano action is under 10 milliseconds or so, I think, also around there. There's been various studies. I think a few of them in the past used to mention it was closer to 7 or 8, but, there's varying piano action measurements. So if you are a pianist by training, or a keyboardist by training, you might be more sensitive naturally to that. I myself was originally a classically trained pianist, so as you can see here, I'm keeping my samples around 128 overall because that's giving me an overall latency of just under 10 milliseconds. So something to watch out for with your audio settings. I'll give folks maybe about 30 seconds to check this out if you need to. So if you need to check your audio settings, again, that's going to be Command, comma in Mac or Control, comma on a PC. Oh no, it started to rain in New York. Ooh. Anyway, okay, I think that's been about 30 seconds. So now that we've checked our audio settings, let's please check our MIDI settings. You're going to find that in the Link Tempo and MIDI tab that's right below your audio tab in the settings, right? And in my case, because I have two controllers connected, I might have more options here compared to you, but don't worry about it. Really, the two things that we want to make sure for most of our controllers in this case is that we want track in and remote in underneath the input ports to be checked for a specific controller. Track in is going to let us play different notes into live, and remote in is going to let us map different functions into live. If we want a knob to control a filter or something else to that degree. So I would say check both track in and remote in for whatever controllers you're using. We don't need sync in because we're not necessarily sharing any kind of timed information. And for now, we don't necessarily need MPE in either. That's gonna be for more expressive playing later on. So we can talk about that briefly if we have some time later, but for now, just track in and remote in. We also don't really need any of these output ports, so you can click on them to disable them if you want to. Right? You may have just heard over Zoom there was a little click that was happening when I disabled those ports. That's very normal. As long as you're not doing this in the middle of a live show, it's fine. Because otherwise you're going to get those clicks and pops while you're playing live for people. So that's why we want to make sure we're set up here first before we proceed. But really, once you've got those things set up, you should be all good. So I'm going to leave this on my screen for a second before I pivot to showing you what I was playing for you just now in the intro of our session before we all came together. So before we begin, we're going to take a look at an example of, or before we dive into live, I should say, because we've already begun. Before we do that, we're going to take a look at a video, a brief video. The whole thing is kind of long. It's about an entire half an hour, not half an hour, 20-minute session. But this is from a series that was developed by the Ableton folks themselves, so you'll find it on their YouTube channel. And it's a series that's called Made in Ableton Live, where it takes you behind the artistic process of a lot of artists. Rachel K. Collier is a person who I've mentioned in previous weeks too, and she's a fantastic live electronic performer, as well as a producer and educator, teaching artist too. She's an Ableton certified trainer trainer as well. And she did this video with the Ableton folks to demonstrate her process in performing a live set in a non-linear fashion with live looping and so on. So we will take a look at the beginning of her performance, also because it involves some live audio processing, which we're about to cover today. So I think that would be really helpful before we even start to take things into a non-linear setting. So here we go. We're going to enjoy her piece. This is a segment of one of her songs called And I Breathe. Here we go.
Electrostatic, supercharged, out of control. My brain paints everything as life or death scenario. Don't need no loading gun, I'm tripping my switch. I'm ready to blow. I can cut these people walls away. Won't somebody bump the bass back into my face? And I breathe. And I breathe.
Okay, cool. We'll take a quick pause there. I know it's a wonderful performance, so I know it's a little bit of a shame to cut it short, but if you'd like to check it out in full, please go look it up on YouTube. I just wanted to pause here because even if, we don't finish the entire song, we can already kind of get a sense of the form that she has, right? So she's got an intro where she's doing all of this layering and live looping, really, if we were to be specific. And then she chooses to kind of take things down a little bit energy-wise by stopping some of what she recorded. Right? And that turns into the verse. She starts to sing over it, and then it leads us back into the chorus where she plays back all of the elements she just created. So live looping is a really great advanced technique or an intermediate to advanced technique for being able to add on a lot of layers spontaneously and play around a little bit more with form in a setting that's not quite tied to a linear arrangement. Right, so you can still have a clear sense of form in your head, like I'm going to play the verse, I'm going to play the chorus, pre-chorus, stuff like that. But you can almost do a fill-in-the-blank situation where it's like, hey, I'm going to actually start to loop the bass instead of having it just play back. I can add on to that in real time, and then you can have a little bit more fun with rearranging different parts of your song, right? So we'll take a little bit a look at this today. I did want to also highlight that because she is singing live and processing a lot of audio live, we will maybe borrow a little bit of what we're hearing from her. You might have already heard that, in her singing, she has a bunch of different kinds of effects with a little controller over here that's called the Akai LPD8. So this is a really nice, small, compact controller. This is the older version of it. I think in the newer version it looks a little bit different. A little bit less round. I think it's more squarish. But in any case, she's using the knobs to control various effects on her vocals, like a filter. We've got reverb and delay as well, right? And this could also be applied to other synthesizer sounds too, or guitar or bass, really any kind of audio input that you might be having. Harp, flute, whatever you'd like. Right. So we'll talk a little bit about what it means to build a rack, similar to what I showed you just now on my Gumroad page, right? Where we'll maybe take a little bit of a look at that too. So let's talk live audio input. At this stage, we're going to head over into Ableton Live. So I'm going to show you my live set. Let's head over here. Okay, cool. And we are going to maybe investigate how we can get started with a live audio input. So if you want to join me over in live, either with your own set or with the set that I've shared with you, that would be wonderful. And I'm actually going to start off right over here with this live audio input that I have. In order to make sure that we're hearing live audio pass through the software with Ableton Live, there's a couple of things that we need to check. But probably the most important thing is to make sure that you have an audio track that can take in your input, right? So there's a couple of different ways that you can do this. Last week we spoke about how to create new MIDI tracks, and we did that for this sine sound that we had, this arpeggiated a little synth, and I can play this for you too. If I arm this track, I should be able to hit a note on my controller, which I will do now. And there it is, right? We did like an arpeggiated thing. And if I arm this other track over here, this MIDI track, I should have some, different kinds of drum samples that I can play for you. So that's by clicking on the arm button. Right, and over here I have a new audio track that I created. I renamed it Vox In as well, just so that you'd be able to know what exactly is happening with it. Vox for vocals, right? You could call it vocals in too, or audio in, totally up to you. But probably the easiest way to do this is, well, two ways perhaps. You can either right click in the empty space in Live, which is control click on a Mac, or depending on what you're set up to do. And you can say insert audio track. You can also use the keyboard shortcut Command T on a Mac or Control T on a PC, so it's totally up to you. Just to show you as a proof of concept, I'm going to press Command T, and boom, I have a new audio track here. Right. So then, all that I need to do is arm that audio track, right? So that's click on this red button over here, just to demo the importance of this button. If I unarm this track right now, la 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 la. Okay. I was trying to like speak, and you may have seen me visually in the camera over here. I was trying to speak, but you wouldn't be able to hear me, right? So you can't actually hear me passing audio through Live if the track is not armed. You also should make sure that the track is set to either auto or in. Right? Changing one of these settings will change how Live is letting you monitor the audio. In the context of anything related to audio production, right? To monitor something is to be able to hear it back. So if I set the track to monitor auto, I'll be able to hear it when the track is armed. And if the track is not armed, I won't be able to hear it, right? So you could use that. That's actually my personal preference. The other option that you have, which will let you hear audio regardless of whether the track is armed or not, is to set monitoring to in. So now even if I turn the arm button off, I'm just hearing the incoming input all the time in Live, right? The reason why I personally prefer to do the auto monitoring and then arm the track is, it gives me a reminder that, hey, I am recording stuff, because what I often like to do when I perform live is record the entire live set, right? So if I set this to in, but I don't arm the track, I'm actually not going to record any audio back in this track. And then later on, when I play back my recorded live set, it's like, hey, where did my live vocals go? Or where did my live other kind of audio thing go? Which is why my personal preference is arm the track and then set it to auto. If you don't want to hear it, then you just unarm the track and then you don't hear anything, right? But you turn it on so that you can arm it. or you arm it so that you can turn it on and pass audio through. So that's a little bit of setting up your audio track, right? Just as a quick reminder too, if you do want to keep things neat and tidy, you can always rename your tracks appropriately, and that is with either right-clicking and selecting rename, or you can also use a keyboard shortcut, Command R for a Mac or Control R for a PC. So just to keep things neat, I've named this Vox In, like I mentioned. I'm also going to rename the other ones. I'm going to call this Live Drums, that's from last week. And I'm going to call this other one Live Synth ARP, or Syn ARP, just for short, right? So if you want to take a moment to do that, please feel free to do that too. Again, shortcut is Command R on a Mac or Control R on a PC. If we're all good though, then let's talk a little bit about basic audio processing with regards to any kind of audio input, right? Regardless of what kind of sound I'm dealing with, I usually tend to process it with at least 2 types of insert effects. Insert effect meaning some kind of audio effect that goes directly onto the audio track, right? And in this case, I have an EQ here, as well as a compressor. And this is something that you'll need to adjust depending on your live input. So if you're following along with your own live input in your project that's open, I'd encourage you to try this out as well. One of the main things that I do when I'm processing some kind of sound is I'll adjust the lower frequency over here that's being filtered out, right, using EQ8. So this is a device in Live that you'll be able to find inside the audio effects category inside your browser in Live, right? As a reminder, the browser is this left panel in Live where you can show different types of categories of items that you can choose from, like sounds, which would be your software instruments, instruments too, just organized a different way, and then audio effects. So this is where you would find your EQ8. There's a couple of different types of EQ inside Live. I like EQ8 because of how specific you can get in changing certain frequencies and filtering things out, elevating things on like the high end if you want. Now my voice is like super bright, which I'll maybe not do for now. Maybe I'll make it just a tiny bit brighter, just a little, but not too bright, because my voice is already fairly bright compared to other folks' voices. And then by this filter over here on the lower side, I can choose how much or how little of something that I want to filter out. With my particular microphone that I'm using at the moment, this is the SM7B. If I bop it or wiggle it around, which you might hear now, right? Either by accident or maybe on purpose, but mostly accidental, I would hope. Right? I'll have a lot of low audio energy coming through that I don't actually want to be heard. So I can high pass it up until where my average voice is coming in. You'll notice that as I'm speaking, we're seeing these peaks here that in theory are what we call the fundamental frequency. So that's kind of like the lowest or the most prominent tone that's coming through in my vocal. So I can actually filter up until there. If I filter too much, which I'll do on purpose now, I definitely sound kind of very filtered and thin. So I don't want to do that, but I kind of, again, want to find that sweet spot. And I think for me, it's around like the 200 or so range. I can further edit this later if I want to. If you're filtering a lower type of sound, like a live bass or even like live piano, you probably don't want to go this high. Maybe you'll go like a little lower, right? But for me, I'm going to end up over here at the moment. So I've got my EQ, and I've also got behind it a compressor. Right, and a compressor in this case, it's helping me reduce the dynamic range between the softest parts of my voice and also the louder parts of my voice. The settings, I should say, for my compressor, I've left kind of the default settings of the compressor that natively comes with Live, right? So you can again get this inside the audio effects category. You're just pulling over compressor, so you would drag and drop that onto a track, right? And from there, really the most important part to do or to look out for is this setting over here that's called threshold, right? If it looks a little different on your end from my end, it's really just because there are a couple of different views in Live's compressor that you can choose from, right? And that's over here on the lower end. There's 3 different options. You got your collapsed view, and then you've also got a different type of curve view, we say. And then you have the activity view, which I believe in Live 12 is the default view. So maybe I'll just stay here. Previously, I had the collapsed view on as my default setting, just because that was my personal preference, but I believe activity view is now the standard view. Right? And really the control that I'm concerned with is thresh over here, which is controlled either by clicking and dragging this up and down, and you can already hear my voice changing, so bear with me as I demo this. But you can click on threshold, drag up and down, or you can also click on this blue line, which will turn a dark blue. It's light blue originally if you don't touch it, but if you touch it, it turns dark blue, and then you can move it up and down. All right. And really where you want to have it is kind of around a position where it's touching the average part of your voice, especially for if you're a vocalist, right? If you're singing a little bit softly, you want it to be catching some of the sound that you're singing, right? So the threshold is the point at which the compressor starts to act when you're processing audio in this case, but it could also be audio from a software instrument, so it matters either way. And in order to make up for any kind of compression that is happening and the gain that's being reduced, again, kind of going back to the reason we compress something to control its dynamic range, in order to make up for any gain that's been lost, I would recommend just turning on the makeup gain button, which will automatically make up gain for you, right? If I don't turn this on, I'll turn it off. Ooh, now my voice is a lot softer, which is fine, right? I still need to make up for that, so I could manually make up for the gain in the output of my compressor, but my experience in live performance is that it tends to be a little more convenient and one less thing to think about if you have the makeup gain automatically working for you, so you don't have to manually adjust that on the fly in the event that your live vocal input changes or your live audio input changes in volume, right? So I usually like to leave makeup gain on for the purposes of live performance, right? And that's going to be your basic processing with insert effects. What I've done over here is just for my own sake too. I like to try to be organized about my devices. So, and by devices, I mean audio effects. So for these two devices, EQ and compressor, I have put them into a group, into a rack. You'll see that I have this little rack over here that kind of like encompasses these two items. Just to show you how I made this rack, I'm going to undo this and then I'll redo it for you. So if you have an EQ and a compressor or whatever kinds of devices that you want to group together for the sake of organization or even just further processing purposes later down the road, you can click on the very first device, shift click on the second device, and now both devices are selected. And you can either right click again or control click and say group, or you can use a shortcut, Command G on a Mac or Control G on a PC. So I'm going to group these together. Ooh, whoops, I pressed the spacebar by accident. I'm going to press Command G because Command is right next to the spacebar. And now these are together, yay! And if I know that I've already set my EQ and compressor and I want to kind of tidy that, I can just close up the rack by double clicking on its name over here. So not the name of the devices, but the name of the whole rack itself. Double click. And now it's collapsed into a neat little slice of something, which we can always open up later on too, right? But that's going to be my EQ and my compressor in this case. Now, kind of doing a little bit of revision from last week too. We talked about live effect processing in general. On the main track over here, I have a couple of things that have been set up already. For example, so I have my low pass filter, low pass, ooh. And how am I adjusting that? I'm making use of the same controller that I used last week with all of you. So I have this knob over here that's controlling the different frequencies. It's letting low frequencies pass through, but cutting out the high frequencies. Right. What else do I have? I have also, let's just close this up. I have also a high pass filter on the other side. So now we're cutting out the low frequencies and letting the high ones pass through. Right, so that's my second filter that I have, and I also had a little bit of a wild card effect that I showed folks, which is fade to gray. What this is it's a combinational delay and filter. And as you can hear, it kind of echoes on quite a lot, right? So I love using this effect. It's a little bit of a at this stage, I almost want to say it's kind of tropey in live performance. It's like if you ever hear anyone who's using live use this particular effect, you can guess and you can be like, hey, that's fade to gray. But I still really enjoy it. I think it's so effective. Yeah, it's really effective and echoey. So I like that. I'm going to keep that handy. Right? So that's specific to the entire mix though, because even if I wasn't doing anything related to my vocals, I would still be able to hear that take effect on the instruments, and that's because these effects are on the main track of the mix. So just to demo this all for you, I'm going to play from the chorus of this song, and I'll play around with these effects so that you can hear how they work. Let's also make sure my main track is in view so that you can see what's going on. So let's play from the chorus of this, and we'll do some filtering. Here we go. So there's low pass. Let's try high pass. Now fade. Cool, great. So you do have some different kinds of options there if you want to play around with these sounds that affect the whole mix, right? But how about for one specific audio input? We can also do that per track as well. There's a couple of ways that we can affect sounds apart from using effects directly on a track, and that's through the use of sends and returns, right? So insert effects, again, go directly on a track. In this case, on the main track, these are also inserts because they go directly there. But before a sound hits the main track, you can also potentially send it to what we call a return track. And in other DAWs, you might hear people call this an aux track, for example. Inside Live, there are two return tracks by default. There's a reverb and a delay. Usually, because of the default settings, these are called reverb and delay, but I've gone in and specifically renamed my tracks verb and DLY 1/4 just to keep things a little bit neater for myself. But how we control our sounds with regards to these two returns is through sending them, right? And underneath each tracks, if you're in arrangement view, which is the linear view of Live, there are two boxes underneath each track's volume box that if I click on and drag upwards, I will send to this reverb. So here's gonna be more reverb. Ooh, cool. Right, I'll bring that down. Again, that's just clicking and dragging up. If I want to add some delay, I can click on the second box and I can add some delay. Yeah. Cool. Awesome. That's what we would usually call a delay throw, right? Or even a reverb throw, where you're temporarily sending some information to some place and then you're bringing it back down as well, right? Now, for the most part, when we're dealing with send and return effects, the big benefit is that you're going to add these effects without actually compromising on the incoming volume of your vocal or your live audio input or whatever you're doing, right? Because with an insert effect, the more wet sound that you get, the more reverb, for example, that you have, the less of that clean, dry sound you have, which can then result in a lack of clarity, right, in whatever audio signal you have. So I'm a big fan of sends and returns. I tend to have them mapped when I'm using my controller for these things. So let's do that together. If you have a controller that you'd like to follow along with, you're certainly welcome to do this too. I'm going to head over to my browser over here. I'm going to open it. We're not in MIDI mapping yet, but I want to open it because that's going to let me see my MIDI mapping settings. And then we'll use the shortcut Command M or Control M, which I told y'all about last week, which will let us do a little bit of MIDI mapping. So yeah, as you can see over here, I have a couple of different things mapped already. I forgot also I had another knob mapped for my synth ARP situation. So at the moment, I have 4 knobs on my controller mapped. I still have at least 4 that I can work with. I can actually go into potentially different programs and banks and change these, but at a glance, I have 4 that I've used, and I have 4 that I have not yet used. So let's use some of the 4 that we haven't yet used to do some send and return controls, right? And I'm going to click on the reverb send for the Vox. And in this case, let's use the knob number 5 on my controller, which is this one over here. So I'm just going to touch it, give it a move. And I'm going to do the same thing for my reverb as well, for the knob next to it, right? And in this case, I think because of how I want to implement these sounds, or maybe, what should I do? You know, change of plans. I'm going to map this to, I think, maybe the end. Let's see, or the last 2 knobs. What if I do that instead? Maybe? Okay. And then maybe this one becomes that. Yes, cool. Just in case, because I think preemptively, I'm thinking, what if I want to do maybe like a filter thing? Usually when I'm programming my live sets, the filters tend to be like to the left of my knobs. So, okay, cool. Let's go with this for now. Now, something else I do want to change though, because right now what will probably happen is if I exit MIDI mapping, in order to test this out, right? As a reminder, you always have to exit MIDI mapping before you test things out, otherwise the knobs won't actually move. But, okay, great. So these are working. That's just me moving these knobs over here on my controller, right? All good so far, but by default, if I bring them all the way down, right, my voice is still kind of dry. I would like there to be at a basic level, even when I'm not moving these knobs to add a lot of delay or reverb, I do want there to be some kind of basic level of reverb and delay. So nothing too much, but just something to give this a little bit more of a cohesive mix, right? By providing an ambiance. So instead of just choosing the default setting for the mapping, I'm going to go back into my MIDI mapping menu, so Command M or Control M, and I'm going to set a minimum value for either of these, or both of these actually. For the verb, I think just now when I tested that out, around -30 seemed pretty good, where you're just kind of getting enough reverb to sense that you're in the space, so that's a good place to start. And then for delay, maybe not even that much. Maybe I'll do -35 as a start. Right, and then that way I can still get delays to be heard when the knob's all the way to the left, but it'll be more obvious when I do a very specific throw. All right, so now that I've done this minimum and maximum value setting, I'm going to press Command M again or Control M to exit this part. And let's test this out. So let me reset these knobs. Okay, great. So now, even with these knobs turned down, right, I already have a basic sense of what spatial effects I have on this vocal. When I want the option of doing a throw, I have that for reverb. And when I want the option of doing a delay throw, I also have the option of doing that with my delay over here, right? So in case anyone needs to try this out on your end, especially if you're following along with me live, I'd love to give you maybe about 30 seconds to try that out, or even a minute if you need it. And in case the reverb and delay gets a little bit annoying, just as an FYI for you, I am going to temporarily turn off the reverb and delay return tracks just to mute them, right? Later on, when we need them for a live demo of the audio processing, I might bring them back later on. But yeah, feel free to take maybe 30 seconds to a minute. If you have questions, please feel free to let me know as well. And I'm going to drink some water. All right, hopefully everyone's doing good. Again, if you have questions, you can feel free to let me know in the Q&A tab in Zoom. But otherwise, before we moved on to beyond live audio processing, because this is kind of where we are at the moment, I did want to do something that was a request from last week, in case people have remembered that. People requested to hear more about vocal processing specifically, so without, jumping too deep into this, I did want to highlight maybe some common things that you might also do on a vocal, if you're not, even if you're not doing like a very extensive like vocal rig of sorts, right? So we've currently got EQ and compression, and then we've got a reverb and delay over here. Yeah, we can hear it. So we got a pretty nicely placed vocal. I'm going to just mute those delays and returns, delay and reverb returns again. But I want to add in a tuning device this time. Ooh, okay. So if you're using Ableton Live, right, and really tuning meaning real-time pitch correction, right? So if you ever hear these terms used, pretty much means the same thing. But we do want to be mindful of real-time versus non-real-time. Like, for example, there are a couple of plugins which you may or may not know out there that do specific non-real-time pitch correction. Probably the most prominent one is Melodyne, which we use a lot in vocal production, right? But that only lets you change the tuning of something in non-real time, because you have to transfer information in and then you have to print that out, or, make your own edits without this being in a live performance setting. If you do want real-time tuning, meaning happening immediately, which also I would say therefore takes more audio processing, so something to be mindful of, then you need a specific live real-time pitch correction device. The good news is that with later iterations of live, there is a device that's called Auto Shift that can kind of do this, and I'll elaborate a little bit on what I mean when it says kind of. But what we usually do in terms of a chain is that if you have EQ and compression on a vocal, in my experience, the tuning tends to go before that. So I'm going to drag Auto Shift again from the audio effects category in live, and I'm going to put that in front of my, ooh, this is so crazy, in front of my EQ and compression. I know it might not be too obvious over Zoom, but auto shift introduces a lot of latency, meaning now I'm feeling very weird because I'm saying words and I'm only hearing them come back to me much later. Not that much later, but enough to make me feel like wildly uncomfortable. The good news is that for auto shift, you do have a mode called live mode that if you click on it, it does reduce the latency. Whew, oh my god. Okay, we're back. But because of this, it does take up a little bit more CPU as well. So just something to be mindful of. I have in certain settings when using auto shift, if it's a really large live set, run into a couple of those clicks that I was mentioning to y'all at the beginning of the session, right? So in those cases, sometimes you kind of have to sacrifice a bit and maybe up the buffer size to make your computer less stressed out, but then it's going to introduce more overall latency to you. So it's a little bit of like a vicious cycle of sorts. So not bad, right? But let's just see what happens over here if I do try to emulate kind of like a very tuned kind of a vocal, maybe almost T-Pain or Cher-esque in these cases. I can set for the most part, my vocal tends to be in like the high register. You'll see over here in auto shift that there are different types of inputs that you can optimize it for. So high seems to be a little bit better for my voice. How do I know? There's a little, how to say, light up button, maybe? A little light indicator. Maybe that's a good word for it. I think that's actually the official word in the Ableton Live manual. So in the indicator for high, right, if I click on this, that's going to give my voice the best input of sorts. And I'm going to make sure that my tuning strength is all the way up at 100, which it is. And I'm also going to turn the smoothing all the way down to 0 milliseconds. And I could actually even turn it off. I think that might help too. I can then set a certain scale for this, right? So maybe I'm setting this to like F, so many different scale types. Just to keep things not too crazy for now, let's do F minor, right? And now, if I just sweep my voice, right? I was trying to do a smooth sweep, like a woo, let me turn it off. I was trying to do like a woo thing, but you might have heard that my voice is being quantized, right? The incoming audio is being quantized. So here's woo without, and here's ooh, with. So now you can hear that quantization. So if this is something that maybe could be interesting for you to explore, feel free to try it out. It's so funny. It's even tuning my speaking, which is fun. Something else that's cool about auto shift too, which again might be fun for folks, is there is pitch shifting built in. So if you want to bring this up by a couple of semitones, I'm just talking with my normal voice, but I'm up by a perfect fifth, because that's 7 semitones, which I changed over here in pitch. I can also go in the reverse direction. So here's me a fourth lower than I usually am. So that's your pitch shifting. You also have formant shifting, which is a control that changes the timbre of the voice without necessarily changing the notes themselves. All right, so if I make the formant of my voice higher, now I'm a chipmunk. And if I make it lower,
now I'm like a whale from Finding Nemo, or Dory when she tries to speak whale.
So that's formant shifting for you, right? This would be a native live device, right? So it comes with live. Let me actually turn it off so that I'm not tuned while I'm talking to you. But like I said, it is a little bit janky for now for live vocal processing. So my personal preference, as much as I love auto shift, right, is to use a third-party device. And my favorite third-party tuning device that I tend to recommend to pretty much everyone is called Waves Tune Real-Time. And really how Waves Tune Real-Time, you can already kind of hear it already, is beneficial is that in my experience through using it, it's already been kind of, less CPU heavy, but also more effective and low latency. Compared to, for example, another third-party plugin called Antara's Autotune. And there are many sub-versions of Antara's Autotune, which are available. But also a big benefit of Waves Tune Real-Time is it tends to be way cheaper to get. I've noticed it vary anywhere between like $25 to like $45. And the reason why there's such a wide range is because sometimes Waves, which is the company that makes Waves Tune Real-Time, has these like sales and discounts that they have. So some of my students who have bought it Managed to get it for like under $30, which is awesome. But I think the maximum price of it either way is around like $45 to $50. So if you are a big like vocalist and you want to have tuning in your live sets, I would highly recommend this too. So just to kind of emulate the same settings that we had just now, I can choose whatever key I want. I think just now we had F minor, right? So let's set it to F minor as well, just so we can do a comparison. And if I change my speed and my note transition to 0, ooh, to me that kind of has a little bit of a cleaner tone compared to auto shift as well. And this is the same tuning device. That's funny, I'm gonna turn it off. This is the same tuning device that I've also used when I've done, the consulting that I mentioned just now, working for other artists and building their own, helping them build their rigs. So I usually recommend this a lot. A Waves Tune Real Time. So hopefully this is helpful for folks. If you find that it's gonna add to your vocal processing practice, very happy for you to use that as well. So that's Waves Tune Real Time, right? For now, that's so funny. When I did the little vocal thing that I usually do, my voice is pretty dynamic, so there's a lot of like rises and falls. It even tuned that. That's funny. I'm gonna turn it off for now. I'll turn it on later, I promise you, when we start to do a little bit more tuning. But yeah, that's a little bit of vocal processing as well. So enjoy yourself, I hope, if that's something that you're into, right? So that's a little bit about live audio processing in general. One thing that I would recommend doing at this stage, if you haven't done so yet, and this is also just a general good practice, is to please save your work. I didn't talk about this that much in previous sessions, I think, but as I'm working on pieces, I usually find it very useful to, after I've saved something, save a different version of it, right? So that's something that we usually call versioning. And in my case, I've been saving this project pretty religiously already every week. You can see over here that I have different versions of the same demo project, and my personal naming convention is that I like to have the date that I've done something at. So in this case, it's 2026, so 2/6 first, and then 04 for the month. Yes, I had a brain fart. And then 19 for the day. But then I also like to include, if I can, a little short word about, a word or two about what exactly I've done. So in this case, I'm going to say live audio, just so that I remember I've processed some live audio in this particular version. And then I'll save that. The audio cut out a bit there because usually when you save, you do get sometimes a little bit of a click, right? So live audio. If you haven't done that yet, please go ahead and do that before we move into nonlinear performance concepts. So I'll give everyone maybe about 30 seconds to a minute in case you want to save your work and version it for the next stage. Alrighty, hopefully everyone's doing good. If we are doing good, then now it's time to transfer our assets from a linear setting into a non-linear setting, right? Before we do that, just a quick word. If you didn't want to perform a whole show just in this linear view, arrangement view in live, that's totally possible. I mentioned this word earlier on just now briefly, playback, right? So Playback. That usually just refers to the field of being able to play things back in a linear fashion, right? So one of the things that you can do as a live electronic performer is take your music, which we've done already, and understanding that, with the intro, verse, pre-chorus, chorus in this case, and then the post-chorus and so on, in your live show, you're going to stick to that exact form, but perform certain elements live. That's a totally valid way to perform. My personal preference, though, is that within, these different clips and so on, I like finding ways that I can improvise a little and play around so that whatever I'm performing live isn't exactly the same as my record, right? Or whatever I've produced. And different people have different opinions on this. So I would always encourage you to look at artists you admire, see what their approach is, or even look for new artists who you're not familiar with yet, but look at what they like to think of in their performance philosophy. My personal philosophy as Daltrick is I want things to be recognizable, yes, compared to my records, right? In case people go back later on and like listen to my music on Spotify, it's like not, or whatever streaming platform they use, or YouTube, right? It's not totally different where it's unrecognizable, but I do still want to have elements that I can play around with that make me excited to perform. I think for me, if I performed my music exactly as I produced it, I think I would be really bored. And for me, that kind of makes live performance lose a bit of its magic, right? And that's where the session view in live, for me, has really come in handy. What I just did over here is I pressed the tab key on my computer, and that lets you switch between session view and arrangement view. So left and right over here, right? Or not left and right, horizontal versus vertical, right? So different ways of performing. And just to maybe shed a bit more light on why this is helpful, I think it could actually be useful for us to transfer things from arrangement view into session view first. And in case you're a little bit newer to this terminology too, one way that I like to remember it for myself, like which view is which, in case that gets confusing for you, is arrangement view goes across. So arrangement across also starts with an A, left to right, and then session view is just the other view that looks a little bit more like an Excel sheet, sometimes I say. So once we're here in arrangement view, there's a couple of ways we can bring assets over into session view. My favorite way is to select a certain portion of time and then use a feature that's called consolidate time to new scene. There's a few ways that you can do this. So if you're following along in your own live set, all that you would need to do is select a portion of time in your timeline. Your arrangement timeline could be on any track. So you don't necessarily need to select all of your material, like drag over it, but just selecting a portion of time in your timeline. And then you can right click and say consolidate time to new scene. Now, if you're following along with me in the project that I shared with you, you might notice that there's a track at the top of live called form. This is an empty MIDI track. There are no notes inside it, and there's also no instrument on the track. And that's because my personal preference is that I like to use empty MIDI tracks to facilitate a little bit more of like grabbing certain sections. I'll show you what I mean. For example, if I'm playing, if I'm still in the production stage, right, and I create an empty MIDI track with this MIDI clip called, let's see, what should we look at? Oh yeah, sure. So maybe I'm editing pre-chorus 2, right? In this case, I have an empty MIDI clip called pre-2. I can just grab that clip that I've already made. I can press Command L, which is the shortcut to loop something. We briefly talked about that last week, I believe. Or if we haven't yet, then that's your shortcut. So Command L on a Mac or Control L on a PC. And now if I just, I've already looped that. So click on the MIDI clip, Command L. And now if I press spacebar, I'm there, right? As opposed to having to like click in one place, drag to another place, and then press Command L, right? It's just like one or two more steps. So having these empty MIDI clips really helps me with my navigation. To that end, right, if I am doing the same consolidate feature that I showed you just now, all I need to do is click on that clip directly, and I can right click and then do the same thing, consolidate time to new scene, because it already selects the length of that clip. Right? So let's go ahead and do this now. Select any portion of time that you want to bring over into live. I would recommend starting off with a short section first, so nothing that's like too long. So in this case, my intro over here, I believe it's 4 bars. So I can click on the empty MIDI clip, say consolidate time to new scene. Live is going to take a while to do its thing, so you might hear my vocal audio cut out for a moment, but that's okay. We'll just be patient. So here we go. Consolidate time to new scene. Cool. That was actually pretty quick, right? Not too bad. And now if I go over into live, I press tab. Ooh, over here in scene number 2. It might be a different scene for you depending on what you may or may not have selected previously in session view. But over here now in the second scene over here, I have my FX clip, right? A new clip has been created of, I think, a riser maybe that I have. Let's see if just making this smaller will help us view the clip. Yeah, okay, cool. So I just zoomed out a little bit so we could see the full clip over here. So I got a riser happening. What else do I have? I think I have this keys thing. Yeah, I have the piano part over here, which I originally played in, right? So maybe I want to do that live. I don't know. Who knows? And if I launch this scene, let's also make this form track a little bit larger. If you ever want to change the width of any track or a track group, you just have to hover over the top right of it and click and drag to the right or the left. The only exception, I think, is if you're dealing with the return tracks. And then instead of clicking on the right side, I think it's the left side over there. Okay, but now if we launch the scene, this is gonna play forever until I tell it to stop. So this will just play forever and forever and forever until we're done. I'm kidding. No, we can't stop it. Right? We can stop it. So just to show you how to start and stop things, right? When we're working in session view, when we've transferred information over, right, we call these different rows scenes. That's the official terminology for it. And if I want to play a scene, I would say that I'm launching a scene. The way we would launch a scene is by pressing on each scene's respective launch button, which is the individual play buttons, right? So there's a play button at the top of live that controls the arrangement view. But if I want to play an individual scene in session view, I have to click on the session view launch button. And if I want to stop a scene, I can do that in one of two ways. I can either launch an empty scene where I know that there are no clips, right? And that's because if I don't have a clip in a clip slot, the play button is actually a stop button instead, right? So that's a nice kind of like automatic feature that happens. I can also click on this button over here, which is the stop all clips button in the main track, right? So there's a square over here. General rule of thumb, anytime you see a triangle, it's a play button. Anytime you see a square, it's a stop button. Anytime you see a circle, it's record, right? So we'll get to that shortly, though. And if you click on the main track's stop button, that will stop all actively playing clips. Something you all might have also noticed just now is that when I pressed the play button over here, right, in some cases, it happens seemingly immediately. But in other cases, it seems to wait a little too, right? And the reason why that happens is because by default, live has what we call a one-bar launch quantization. What that means is that for every action that you execute in session view, and even arrangement view to a degree, depending on how you're doing it, but when I press something in session view, live is going to wait to the nearest bar for it to play. So that's a really useful feature, I would think, by default, because otherwise we would be pressing clips and we have to get it almost exactly in time to make sure that our pieces are moving correctly. But now I can kind of experiment a little bit freely, right? Like what if I, for the intro of this piece, instead of just launching the whole scene and having that play, perhaps I want to start with the keys first, so I can launch this individual clip. Just one clip. And then maybe I'm talking over this when I'm interacting with the audience. I'm saying, here's my new song, which is an ID, which doesn't have a name yet. Right? And then maybe when I'm ready to move to the next section, I launch my FX clip, which is going to take about 4 bars to enter. Right? And then I just launched the next scene, and it could be the next section, which we will do in a moment, but it could also be, something else. So that's one way that you can really benefit from session view. You can kind of play in this non-linear way. You're not tied to a very particular timeline, right? So I'd love to do a little bit more with everyone here for session view. Right now we just have one scene, which is the intro, right? And I just reselected it over here to make sure that it's, my current scene in focus. I'm going to go back to arrangement view though, so I'll press tab. Right, and you'll notice that now arrangement view is grayed out. Do not panic. It is all good. All that this means is that Ableton Live has detected, hey, you executed some kind of action from session view. So in order to protect whatever is in arrangement view, we've temporarily disabled it. Right? It's just temporary. So if you do want to resurrect what you have in arrangement view, you can click on this button over here. That is the, there it goes, okay, it's the back to arrangement button, right? It only shows up if you've executed an action from session view. So great, again, I've gone and stopped everything here. And the back to arrangement button is this orange, red, or I guess it's more orange, orange button that has a play button and it has these 3 lines, right? So that's the Ableton Live representation of arrangement view going horizontally from left to right. So if you click on that, then arrangement view will show back up over here. Yay. And then you can do whatever you like. Right? But I'm going to transfer this into session view. Should we do the whole thing? Maybe not. Maybe we don't need to, right? So we've already transferred the the intro in, let's just transfer everything up until chorus 1 for now. All right, so I'll right click on verse 1A's track, MIDI clip, empty MIDI clip, and then I'll say consolidate time to new scene. If you're working with your own piece, then you'll just need to manually select the time, which I'll show you now. Right, so just click on any track, and then you can right click and do the same thing. So I'll try that now. You'll hear my voice cut out for a little bit. Or maybe not. That was fine. Yeah, that was good. Okay, so same thing for verse 1B. I think this one will cut out a bit because it's going to consolidate some audio files. So let's see. All right. Now the pre. Now the chorus, part 1. And chorus, part 2. Great. And now I have these 6 scenes laid out over here in arrangement view. In session view, excuse me. You'll notice that I have an empty scene at the top of live over here. Don't worry if you don't, right? You're totally welcome to, if you don't, right? So let's pretend I'll get rid of this here. If you don't, but you want to insert an empty scene at the top, you can just click and drag any of these other empty scenes and bring it to the top of live. The reason why I like to do that is I usually like to have one empty scene at the top and at the bottom in case I need to kind of emergency stop everything. Then I'll just launch that empty scene to clear out everything that's playing in a given moment. So I'd love for folks to try this out. I know I did that very quickly, but in your own project, or if you're using the same demo project that I shared, if you'll just right click on any of these scenes, these MIDI clips, right? Let's consolidate them to new scenes so that we have 6 new scenes all together in session view. And if anyone has questions, you can let me know. So I'll give you maybe about a minute to check this and try it out. Ooh, there's like a fun bird outside my apartment. It's like screaming. I don't know if anyone else heard that. But hopefully everyone's doing okay if you manage to transfer things over. Just to demonstrate how this works now, this is the part where maybe I'll show you a little bit of controllerism, if I may. So you may have noticed that as I'm over here in session view, I have this green box that's popped up. And if you don't see any box of any color on your end, please don't worry. The only reason that's showing up is because I have my Launchpad Mini controller connected, right, which I showed you just now. And just to get a close-up view of this, I will actually stop sharing my screen. So bear with me for a moment so that you can see my camera a little bit more closely in live, right? And these different things that we're seeing over here correspond exactly to the clips that we just worked with in live. So I have all of my form clips in this particular track in session view. All of these orange ones are drums because I color-coded them for my live set. That's usually a big part of my practice too. I have some standard colors that I go for. These yellow ones are FX. The dark blue ones are my bass clips, and then my instruments in this case are all collectively purple. So if I launch a scene, maybe scene number 3, by pressing this button all the way here on the side, right? There's a column of buttons over here. These are all my scene launch controls, right? So I can launch an empty scene if I want. I can also launch the intro, which is 4 bars. So now here is the verse. And then I'll sing whatever I want over this part. Right? So that's how I navigate these sessions. If I want to stop everything, I just launch an empty scene. So let's launch the empty scene. We just launched the empty scene. Okay, great. And you'll notice, again, going back to launch quantization, now everything has like stopped at the nearest bar. I didn't have to press that exactly on time. I just had to press it slightly before the section, and then it would stop altogether at the next bar, right? This could be a fun way to maybe navigate different parts of the set, because what if I maybe want to start with in the intro, in the new intro that I'm doing, or maybe as I'm transitioning from one piece to another, what if I don't want to start with just the keyboard, but I want to almost do like a mashup of sorts with drums? So I'm just going to launch the drum clip from the chorus. And this is the part maybe where I interact with the audience. This is going to go on for as long as I have it go on for. So if I go to my other controller now, don't forget we still had some effects, right? So I can manipulate this here. Slowly bring that up. And now switch back to my other controller to add the keys. And next, maybe I'll add some bass from somewhere. Let's see. Maybe the pre-chorus bass. Let's do a 4-bar riser. And now we're ready for the verse. 2, 3, go! There's our verse. Okay, cool. Let's pause right there. I know I just went very quickly through all of these things. But yeah, that's a little bit of how you would launch, right? So if you don't have a controller with you, please don't worry. All of the things that I just showed you are executable through Live by just clicking around. So let me switch over back into Live. I'll share my screen with you, right? So instead of having a controller to click on these individual blocks, you could totally just use your mouse for now or your trackpad. I have a little wireless mouse that I'm using. But you can use your trackpad, right? And you can click around on these different clips to play them. So here's my keys. And then bass, 2, 3, launch. Maybe something from the drums in verse 1B. And if I want to stop everything, stop all the clips, right? I'm just clicked on the empty scene to do that, right? And you know, if you want to even play around with different effects and so on, this would also be a cool time to try it out, because I'd love to give you maybe even more time than I did just now. How about maybe 3 minutes? It might seem a little long or short, but I'll check in with everyone in about 2 to 3 minutes, perhaps. See what happens if you try to launch different scenes, either using your mouse or your trackpad, or if you have a controller, you could even try to do it with a grid controller or without, if you prefer. So just about 2 or 3 minutes to kind of mess around individually. If you have questions, of course, you can also let me know too, and I'd be happy to help. So have fun in these next couple of minutes. Alrighty, I think that's been a couple of minutes now. So if anyone has any questions, again, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, that is kind of an intro to nonlinear playing. If you're playing around with different pieces, right? Something that I showed just now was the intro improvisation, where I was playing different kinds of clips and combining them. But we could even also do the same thing for an outro too, right? So maybe just to give you a bit of an example, perhaps I could even show some live audio processing in relation to this right now. So I will turn the reverb and delay back on for my vocal. You'll hear it be more spacey. And at least when I'm demoing this particular part of the track, just to make my voice sit a little bit better in the mix, I will make it just a tad quieter. I had it a little bit louder because usually when I'm presenting over Zoom, sometimes you do need the vocal a bit louder. So I just decreased it by about 3 dB for now, but I can change this later on too. Now, just now I mentioned to you that this song, well, actually, let me kill the reverb first. Let me undo that. Just now I was mentioning to you that this song is still kind of in like ID for me. I haven't really written a full top line for it yet, but I do have some ideas, at least for a hook, that I came up with during the top lining workshop that I ran last time. And then since then, I've been kind of scribbling some ideas on my phone for lyrics. So the hook of this song, which will probably be the name of the song too, is Breakaway. So there's a line that will go, don't you break away again. And that's going to be, I think, what I sing. And perhaps at the end, I can do some vocal effects on that too, with my sends and returns. Now let's actually set the key of this. I think this song, if I take a look at the programming that I did, I think it's in the key of C. Okay, so let's do that tuning that I mentioned. This will be a good live demo of the tuning. I'm going to turn on Waves Tune Real Time. Okay, that's a little crazy. But instead of F natural minor, I'm going to make this C natural minor, and I will lessen the speed a little. So I'm still getting some amount of tuning on my vocal, but just a little bit less of that. Let's see. This is going to be a tonic, so baby, caught a feeling now that you found me. Okay, I think that'll be fine for now. But I'll definitely have to practice this a little bit more, and so on. But yeah, just to demo a little bit of an outro with live effect processing for you, let's turn these back on. And I will launch from chorus number 1. So here we go. And then I'm going to show you maybe some live effects if I can. So here's chorus number 1. Cool. And then I'll do the second half of chorus 1. Let's see. Baby, caught a feeling now that you found me, here, so come save me. You got me living loud, and don't you break away again. Don't you break away again. Don't you break away again. Break away again. Don't you break away again. Cool, so that was my improvised outro. Oh my god. All the effects are going crazy. I know you might not have seen me do it just now, but just to demo what I was doing for you with the vocal stuff, as I got to the end of the song, I said, hey, you know, I have a last chorus, but I don't actually have a formal outro. So I started to stop different clips in session view using my launchpad, but then also do some live effects here. So for example, don't you break away. That's a reverb, delay throw, right? And then I have the don't you break away again when I'm ending super spacey, right? So that's something that I usually tend to do when I am performing live vocals. And I also realized I forgot to change the volume, so it might have been a little off balance, but thank you for bearing with me. That's a little bit of how I usually tend to do this like improvised kind of ending thing with both a combination of effects and form control. Right. So now the next step, I'm going to turn off the tuning on my vocal. That's funny. The next step, and perhaps the last technique, which is that slightly more advanced one that I wanted to show y'all just now, is live looping, which means to play something in real time, either as MIDI or audio information, and then to record it live and have that play back on its own, right? There's a couple of different ways to do this, but I thought maybe one good way to show you an example in this case is audio live looping. In my experience, it tends to be a little bit easier to kind of get the point across about like recording something and then having it play back. You can, of course, do live looping with MIDI as well, but I think live looping with audio could be a good demo for this part. So if you want to follow along, again, you're totally welcome to. If you have your own audio input on your end that you want to try out, or you can just check out some of the techniques that I'm showing you. Really at the core of live looping is you want to play something back, sing it back, do some kind of sound, and then have it continue to play as you move on to other parts, right? So the way I usually like to set it up is on a totally separate audio track, because in this case, my live audio track for my vocal, presumably I'm going to be mainly using it to sing, right, and be heard throughout. So I want to contain and organize my live loop on a separate track. So I'll create a new audio track. Again, you can right-click in the empty space, similar to what we did in session in arrangement view. So either of these things will work, where you click and say insert audio track. But I'm going to do it in session view since we're already here. Or you can use the keyboard shortcut Command T on a Mac or Control C on a PC. So insert audio track, and to keep things neat and tidy, I'm going to call it Vox Loop 1 in case maybe I have extra loops that I want to record later. I'm also going to color it green because green, different shades of green, that's usually like a vocal related thing in my own color coding kind of organization in my head. And rather than taking the input, right, by default, Live makes the audio track inputs for most audio tracks that you create as your external input if you have an audio interface or a microphone or an instrument connected. In my case, I'm not actually going to take it from the external input. I'm going to take it from my live vocal from Vox in. So in the section of this track where it says audio from, I'm going to click on external input and I'm going to choose Vox in instead, which is this track, right? So that's already my main audio track. And now if I arm the track, I will see that there's something gray popping up. We don't hear it, and that's because my monitoring is set to off. All right, this is actually the part just now when I brought up monitoring to you that I didn't mention. I talked a little bit about monitoring on auto settings, monitoring on input settings. Monitor off means that a track which you're arming is ready to receive MIDI information or audio information, but it's not going to be heard until it's played back and recorded. Right, so visually, one way that we can tell if a track is set to monitor off is if we say something, and instead of the meters showing up as green, it shows up as gray. That's like a feature that lets us say, hey, we are getting sound passing through, but we're just not hearing it in real time. I'll be a little bit careful with this next part, because I do want to show you, if I switch this to monitor auto, check. Okay, cool, not too bad. But with monitor auto now, I'm actually getting a doubled signal. So I don't really want that. I want to set this to off, right? So that when I'm looping, I'm not getting too dramatic of a change in the volume of a track, right? When I decide to loop, then I can click on any record button in the clip slot of this track, right? Just now going back to kind of our shapes that we remember. Play is usually a triangle, stop is usually a square, record is usually a circle. So if I click on the Vox loop tracks, any of these circles in any clip slot, let's see what happens just to get a sense of the possibilities. So I'm going to click here, and now, ooh, there's this loop that's like kind of like flashing, and ooh, it looks like the waveform of my voice that's coming through. So that's currently recording. The play button is in red, which usually says that, hey, you're actively recording into this clip. If I press the same play button again, and now, ooh, there's this loop that's like kind of now it's playing back, and ooh, so I hear my loop in the background. My voice that's coming through. So, but I can also keep speaking. Currently recording. The play button is in red, which usually says that's crazy. There's too many things going on. Okay, but that at its core is live looping, right? And being able to record different pieces of audio information from like one track into another track. So I'm going to undo that, or delete this clip rather. I don't quite want to have this extraneous loop in the background, so I want to keep things neat and tidy. But how does live looping kind of play into the performance context. I'll show you this and then I'll perhaps let you take some time to try this on your own too. We're able to spontaneously make some layers to kind of like set up a performance, maybe build some anticipation before we start to do the rest of the piece, or in the middle of the piece, before we proceed to like other sections. So just to demo this for you, I will maybe add a little bit more reverb and delay to my loop that I record later, and I'll make it a little louder too, right? Let's see, how should we do this? Yeah, let's do it this way. I will start from the top of the piece, right? So I'll start from my intro, but while I'm looping the intro keys, I will record maybe like an initial audio loop into my loop track that just a couple of ideas, maybe like a vocal, like breakaway, something related to breakaway. I'll improvise on that a little too, so I'll think of something as it's playing. And maybe for the sake of demoing, I'll also show you two vocal loops and then let you try this as well. Since I've already set this up for an input properly, I can just duplicate the track and that'll give me an exact copy of my settings. I'm just going to rename this Vox Loop 2 so that I know what's happening. And yeah, let's actually make that not that much delayed, but maybe more reverb on both. Okay, great. Now, and in both of these tracks, I will record some kind of loop, and we'll see how that sounds. So here we go. Let's launch the keys. I'll continue to talk over this when I can, but let's also increase or turn on the reverb and delay. Okay, I got some ideas. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, go. Break, break, break away, away. 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 Break, break, break. Okay, not bad, although the timing of that second one was actually a little late. You can see it over here. And I think maybe the first one was a little early. Yeah, so Claire needs to work on her timing. But perhaps these are the two loops that I use in the intro to kind of just build an atmosphere with or some anticipation for my audience, like especially if they happen to have heard the song before, or even if they haven't, right? They'll know now that the song is called Breakaway because I've said some idea related to that. It doesn't also have to be words too. It could just be like an ooh type of thing, or like a vocalization, or if you're playing on a synth, right? Maybe it's like a bunch of chords, a live chord progression that you're looping. But really just based on the idea of like, hey, we're recording directly into the track in a given moment. We're having the loop playback immediately after, and that's going to give us some sense of building things in real time, rather than just starting with all of these pre-prepared assets, which is what we mainly talked about last week, right? So I'll just demo that one more time for you, but maybe this time I'll show you how it works on the controller in case people are curious. So bear with the speaking with the reverb and delay for a second, because I did want to show you this with the reverb and delay. So if I'm over here with my controller, my not MPK Mini, my Launchpad Mini, excuse me, I can use also these left and right arrows to kind of like navigate the live set. And over here, you'll see those two clips that I just looped. Right, so I'm going to delete them inside Ableton Live just by clicking with my mouse. So let me just press backspace for both. All right, and for now, I'm also going to just turn back on my tuning so that gets recorded too. And let's try that one more time. This improvised intro with some live looping. So here we go. Maybe we should add some like bass, just like for some low end from the pre-chorus. All right, here's the live looping part. Break, break, break away, away. 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 Break, break, break away. Maybe filters, maybe. Away, away. Break, break, break away, away. And then maybe we're ready for the verse. So now the verse is here, right? And the loops are stopped, which is fine. All right, I can always bring them back whenever I want to. Break, break, break away, away. Break, break, break away. And let's just stop all the clips, right? So that's a little bit of how this works in real time, specifically with a controller. Like I mentioned, of course, you can just click around in your DAW to make this happen. So I'm going to share the DAW with you again, right? So here's live. You can just click around. It does get a little tricky because you kind of have to like time yourself, right? You have to like make sure that you know exactly where every track is so that you can click on stuff. And that's really where a controller does come in handy. Let me just kill the reverb and delay, and also just turn off the tuning for a quick moment. There we go. Okay. But yeah, please feel free to try it out. I'd love to give everyone who would want to try this out maybe like 2 minutes or so, or maybe even 3. And if anyone has questions, you can let me know again too. But yeah, live looping, really big technique, a little bit more advanced to a degree, but something that can be really useful and very dynamic in any kind of live performance setting. So feel free to try it out and let me know if you have questions. Okay, it's been a couple of minutes. Hopefully everyone is doing all right. Again, if as usual, if you have questions, please let me know. You may have noticed that as I was letting you do some experimentation, my Zoom screen sharing of live kind of got smaller a little bit, and that's just because I wanted to zoom out to show you really what the entire live set currently looks like. Right? And if this was my live set that I was going to use for a performance, let's say, there's just a couple of more things that I would do, which kind of actually closes off our main content section for this entire series, which is to optimize your live set and to make it the most playable, right? Or the most reliable in a live context, for example. Probably the most important one, at least for me, to be able to do, is to have organization and get rid of things that I don't need, because I don't really want to be bothered by things that I'm, not playing live. So, first thing, kind of going back to my versioning thing that I mentioned to you just now, I'm going to save this as a new live set. And I'm going to call this, just now I said live audio, I'm going to call this version session view, just so that I know that, hey, if I open up this view, I am now working in session view. Right, so versioning, that would be the first thing that I did. I would also get rid of any of these scenes that don't need to be here. By default, Live gives you 8 empty scenes in session view, in case you start from there and you want to play around with different kinds of pieces of information. But when we did the consolidate time to new scene function just now, additional scenes were added. which is fine, right? All that we need to do now, our job to kind of keep things clean, is to delete any scenes that are extraneous. So I'm just going to click on scene number 9 here, just press delete or backspace, get rid of those. For me, in my performance practice, like I mentioned, I like having one empty scene at the top and at the bottom, just so that I can press launch those if I need to, like stop all clips, for example. So I'll keep those there. And that's my scene cleanup, right? So that's one aspect of this. I'm going to press save again, Command S or Control S. Great. So I've cleaned up session view now. If I go back into the arrangement view, right, you'll also notice that I have some additional material here. Now, this isn't necessarily a bad thing to do because of that feature of session view just now that we talked about, right? Anytime you activate something from session view, like you launch a scene or, press the stop all clips button, arrangement view gets temporarily grayed out so that the views don't interact too deeply with each other. But my personal preference, again, in the spirit of optimization, is I do actually like to delete anything that's going on in arrangement view. Because if I have done some, maybe automation of clips, or if I've got a very specific part of the arrangement that I don't actually want to hear in the session by mistake or, by any other kind of means, I want to make sure I have a clean slate over here. So I'm going to go back to the arrangement view. And I'm going to select all of this stuff here. So now you do have to select stuff if you want to follow along with me, right? Or you can also click anywhere inside the arrangement view and press Command A. That will also select everything that you have, right? And I'm just going to get rid of this completely. Instead of pressing the backspace or delete button, which will also work for the most part for this purpose, right? My personal preference is actually to use the delete time feature in Live. What that does is that it also, for the most part, it makes sure that any automation that you've drawn in arrangement view gets deleted too. So it gets rid of all of the time in arrangement view that you've kind of used and messed around with. And there's a couple of ways to get to that page. If you want to use a shortcut and be handy with it, you can actually find this command in the edit menu, but the shortcut for me is a lot easier. It's going to be Command Shift Delete or backspace on a Mac, and Control Shift Delete or backspace on a PC. So I'm going to use that shortcut. And boom, now everything is gone. So I can go back into session view then and, have peace of mind that I'm not going to accidentally play or launch anything from the arrangement view, right? That's also why the versioning thing is so important, because now that I've gotten rid of this, right, I don't actually have my original production anymore, right? So you don't want to be that person who, in the spirit of creating their live performance version, has inadvertently deleted their production version. Please don't do that to yourself. So please keep versioning your work so that you know what you have as like a record, right, of things that you've done, right? So now I can confidently play from session view without anything happening. Right. I suppose the only other thing that I would mention, which maybe caught your attention too, is that my volume balancing does need a bit of work. I've been clipping a bunch and talking to you, but mainly for the reason that I mentioned to you just now, for having a louder type of voice for these online sessions that I do. So usually when I'm singing in a real time setting or performing live, I aim to have headroom between -6 to -3 dB, usually -6 if I want to be on the safer side. And how I would do that is I would grab all of my tracks, right? And first of all, I would play the loudest part of the song, which I think is the chorus in this case. So I'll play that, and I'll sing over it. That you found me here, so come save it. You got me living loud, and don't you break away, don't you break away again. Okay, that's fine. I'll stop all clips, right? And it looks like if I round it up, I'm like 2 dB too loud, right? So the difference between +2 dB and -6 is -8, right? So I would grab all of my tracks. I click on one track, press Command A or track group, right? And I lower everything by -8. And let's check again. Okay, test out the singing. Got a feeling now that you found me. That you found me here, so come save it. All right, that's fine. It's around -5, which is a little hotter, but still kind of in that safe target zone that I mentioned, -3 to -6. Obviously now I am a little bit quieter, but that's okay, because in the live performance, I can always bump up the output volume of my interface, which we talked about in previous weeks too, right? Having a specific dedicated audio interface. Now, just to make sure I can be heard satisfactorily in Zoom, I'm just going to bring all of that up again. So that would be something else that I would check out for optimization, or look out for when optimization. Right. And if something's been optimized, then of course I'll save that. I might even version that too and say, session view optimized, just so that I know that I've done the optimization. And that's kind of it for how you transfer, let me mute the reverb and delay, for how you would transfer something from a studio production into a non-linear dynamic kind of arrangement if you want it to perform it live. Of course, there's many ways to do this, and you can also think about how live you want your song or your performance to be, which we spoke about, in week 1. So if you need to catch up on that, please feel free to check out that recording too. Before we open things up for Q&A, I feel like when we get to the end of these series that I do, we always end up with okay, now we've learned all this stuff. That's great. Of course, we need to practice it. We need to make sure that we're putting in regular effort and consistent effort if we want to become better at these things. But otherwise, where do we actually go from here? So I wanted to show you 3 examples of performances just for a couple of ideas for what to do. The first performance that I wanted to show you is a little bit more of a linear performance in arrangement view, for the most part, by an artist called Anomaly. Anomaly is a fantastic producer, artist, and also a pianist, right? Live performer. For his live performances, he always plays live piano or different kinds of sounds, live keyboard, I should say, because sometimes it's a piano sound, but other times it's a different sound. And here's an example of him doing a more playback type of approach. So what we did in week 1 and week 2. So let's just check out a bit of his performance. He has a controller that he's using to change some sounds and you do a couple of effects, but for the most part, just playing live synths, live instruments over his backing tracks. So you can kind of see him use different sounds. Really wonderful performance. This is a song called Vellers, so in case anyone's interested in checking it out. But still fairly faithful to the structure of his produced song. So if you look at the produced version of Vellers, it's kind of the same structure. You can also do some crazier stuff though, like what if you incorporate more controllers? What if you play around with form? And for that, we're going to turn to Laura Escude, who's one of my favorite live electronic performers and also one of my mentors actually as I was getting started in the playback field. Learned so much from her. This is a live performance that she did at Loop, which is the summit that Ableton used to host. And it was so wonderful, but the last Loop that we had was, I think, pre-COVID. So it's been a while since we've had Loop. But here's an excerpt of Laura's performance from Loop. It's her song called Transmute. She's going to do some live audio with her violin, but also a lot of controller-related things. So here we go. Cool. So a bunch of live looping of effects, but I do want to jump forward a bit, so bear with me. We're going to go into the later half of Laura's piece. Here we go.
I'm
So lots of different kinds of like jumping between parts, playing different songs. There's like a cool drop in the middle of drums, which I think we'll see here. Lots of live looping too, right? So she played the drums live and then she jumps to other parts. So a really cool performance. Again, would love for you to check it out. So you can do more controllerism things. I don't know if anyone caught just now, but she was actually using like a Wiimote. Like what a throwback. To send MIDI information instead, because Wiimotes and different kinds of game controllers can actually send out MIDI info, which is super sick in my opinion. So there's that too. Now, something else, of course, that you can do too is collaborate. So I was going to show you a video of two of my former students. They've now graduated, but here's them playing together. So we've got Bethany Liu and also Ben Zakharenko. And they were both my students at Berklee College of Music. They're now doing very cool things out in the world. But here is a dual performance of live electronic instruments with also live audio input, and so on. I'm going to jump a little bit forward just to highlight the part where they're both doing things together, because they kind of alternate a little bit. They both sing as well. So here we go. Here is a piece that they did together called Till We Breathe Again. It's an original.
We can breathe, till we can breathe. And when the daylight seems far, stay around with me before the fall meets sunlight. Hold on tight. And when the daylight seems far, stay around with me. Don't let it go. Don't let it go.
Till we breathe again.
So we'll pause. But in this case, yeah, really great example, I think, of an electronic group duo in the setting where they each have different things that they're playing live and they're really doing it in a complementary type of way that's fluid as a group. And that was something that we didn't talk about in previous weeks, so I just wanted to float that out as an example in case anyone is in a band or in a duo or other kinds of ensembles where you might want to incorporate electronic elements. It's totally possible to do it as well if you have a good sense of, hey, what you want to play live. So they're both doing live things, really, in their own systems, doing a lot of finger drumming in this case, which maybe we talked a little bit about last week as a part of like sample triggering. So we'd love for you to check both of them out too. They both make wonderful music as well as artists. So that brings us to the end of this series. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Wow, what a time we had in the last 3 weeks of being together. It's time for some Q&A. So if you do have any questions, we have a few minutes left in our meeting for these questions to be answered. And if you don't have any questions right now, that's also fine. You can connect with me at the Daltrick, which is my artist handle, or at the Small Prof. Usually for education stuff, I use the Small Prof. So if you want to connect with me there on Instagram, TikTok, stuff like that, that's where you can find me. But yeah, I'm going to take a quick sip of water right now in case anyone wants to use this time to drop some questions in the Q&A feature. You're certainly welcome to do that. And well, in any case, I'll just drink some water. We'll see if anyone has questions. Ooh, okay. Let me pull up the Q&A. Let's see. Oh, great. You are most welcome. I'm so happy to hear that the sessions were helpful. And it's great to see you. Yay. Okay, cool. If anyone else has questions or comments, feel free to let me know. Maybe just, jumping off on this a little bit. I think like the, live performance in general, it's something that I also keep sitting with and growing with. I've been doing this for like over a decade now, which is kind of bonkers to think about. But I always learn something new every year. And I think that's why, or every month, sometimes every day. That's why I kind of keep coming back to this as well. I think for me as an electronic performer, I really think about my laptop plus controllers being my instrument. And since I've decided that it's going to be my instrument, I do my best to put in the work for that to be the case. Yes, you are most welcome as well. Thank you so much for joining in and spending this afternoon or morning or night, regardless of where you are with me as well. It's been a wonderful time. So last call for questions or thoughts, if anyone has them. Okay. Do you have to memorize what each button is on your controller and the sound corresponding to it? Great question. For the most part, yes. A lot of it is memory. But how I like to think of it is I kind of compare it to how a guitarist has to remember where the note C is on their guitar, on their instrument, right? So for electronic performers, our job is to kind of memorize where these things are too. Perhaps the main thing that's different from a standard instrument, a traditional instrument like guitar or even violin or even like a saxophone or something is that for us, depending on what set is what set, it can change, right? So that's really the main difference that maybe requires a little bit more practice and strategizing. There are ways that you can make things easier for yourself, of course. So for example, in my case just now, when I was showing folks the Launchpad, with the different colors and so on, I've developed my own color coding system where I know that if something is orange, that's definitely a drum sound. Or if something is blue, then that's definitely either, if it's dark blue, it's a bass sound. If it's light blue, it's a guitar. So there are ways that you can make things easier for yourself. But truthfully, there is a lot of memorization that goes into it too. So yeah, great question. It's like a yes, and you can make things easier for yourself if you are very particular about the way that you're organizing things. So yeah, great question. Cool. I think that's just about all the time that we have, everyone. So again, feel free to connect if you would like to at the Small Prof for EDU stuff or at Daltrick for educational things. And please also join us, for future Femme House sessions too. You can follow at This is Femme House on different platforms. Thank you for joining us for this whole series. If you want to rewatch it, it'll be on YouTube in a few days on Femme House's channel, and you can also check out sessions 1 and 2 from previous weeks. So thanks so much again, everyone, and hope to see you at the next session. Bye! Have a good evening or afternoon or night or morning, wherever you are. Have a good one. Thanks so much for joining us. See you!
Stars align in place. In quiet hours, I'll wander around. For when before time comes, I'll make our way till we can breathe. Oh yeah. And when the daylight seems far, stay around with me before the fog meets sunlight. Hold on tight. And when the daylight seems far, stay around with me, don't let it go. Don't let it go.